Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for us to welcome our first team captain. Would you please join me in welcoming to the microphone Professor Keith Smettem.
It's pleased to be here. I'm not going to make much comment about drainage actually, because I've been involved in drainage actually in my earlier career, and I wish you all the best for it. I really do. I hope it works. I'm going to just turn back to our starting presentations, and Sarita, I think, gave you a beautiful illustration of the productivity of salt land that can be achieved, and particularly if you look at it from a point of view of salt land pasture agronomy. And she made a good point actually as well about the grades of salinity that can occur in the landscape, and the fact that we can actually find crops fit for purpose. And really that's an important point to make, is that we need to think about land fit for purpose as well. So coming back to the ideas of land stewardship that are affected by this particular problem we face, and showing that we can actually still gain some productivity gains from this land. Clearly, as we said earlier on, it would be crazy to accept that the productivity is going to be anything like the productivity of a grains farm. It's not. But equally, I think grain farmers who've dealt with this have also realised that retiring bad land can actually improve on-farm productivity. So you don't put good money after bad on the farm. You know this, I don't have to tell you this. Work that I've done, actually been involved in to back up some of the things that Sarita said actually. We've been involved over about an 8 to 10 year period in various trials in the Wheatbelt, particularly out at Wickerpin and at Corrigan, looking at issues of what can be recovered really by planting different tree species in these landscapes, and particularly looking at biomitigation of carbon following afforestation of abandoned salt farmland. We've demonstrated in the Wickerpin, for example, with Eucalyptus occidentalis and also with saltbush, you can get about 4 tonnes per hectare per year. That's a sort of number over about 8 years of the trial. And for the saltbush, about 2 tonne a hectare per year was edible dry matter. That's the sort of numbers you can get. So there is some productivity there. It's not great, but it's off land that you would normally retire. So you can make something out of that land. And given that there's also different salt tolerance, as Sarita said, between different species, we would propose actually an integrated approach that would really take salinity gradients into account and replicate natural wetland ecosystems and produce biotic fodder and biomass in those systems. It would be much better actually if the government actually came and gave us a reasonable price on carbon. Any government actually would give us a reasonable price on carbon. Then we can actually have some security to know what the target would look like. Because there is a great opportunity for carbon sequestration in these landscapes, in what are basically abandoned salt lands. And the amount of land there that's available for that actually would be a really good use for this land as well, to get the carbon credit for that. But until the price is set properly and we've got a proper market, that's still, I think, in the future. But it's worth bearing in mind that it's a potential that is there. I'm going to tell a little story actually before I go on about. I actually cut my teeth in the grains industry in South Australia when I was a younger researcher, and spent about 10 years or so working with the grains industry, actually on no-till farming to start with. And there was a systems approach to that, looking at how it compared to the conventional farming systems at the time. And I used to go out in the Wheatbelt towns, and at the time actually I looked a bit like Ian Botham. You might not think it now, but at the time English cricketer Ian Botham and I had some similarity in appearance. One because I had a moustache at the time, which made me look a bit like him. But the funny thing was, when I went to farmer meetings and we'd do the presentations, I'd always end up and say, any questions? And somebody would go, what's your batting average? And that always stuck with me, because how the hell do they know my batting average is so bad? But anyway, that was just part of an introduction to the fact that I think that when we come back to think about this idea of a systems approach to the farming operation, and actually our negative speakers here mentioned this about the whole of systems approach, and there's a lot to be said for this actually, in the context of actually utilising and making value out of productive saline land, and equally thinking about if we say we're going to retire some land, we need to push the production on the rest of our system. That's what's going to make the money, and that's what's going to make us productive. And certainly, if you look at the world need for food into the future, all farmers are going to have to lift their yields around the world, basically, to meet the future food demands. So somehow we've got to do that. And I would certainly propose looking at a grand challenge to say, we should be looking to double the state's wheat yield. Think about that. You say he's crazy. How do you do that? You know, how do we think about that? Let me give you a couple of slides. I'll show you something. Hopefully I can get on. Is it big enough? This is just to give you a bit of a paper that's in, it's not my paper, but it was in Australian Journal of Experimental Agriculture a little while ago. But what it shows is some of the key trends of Australian wheat yields through time. And I want to show just a bit about scientific innovation and what's happened. So looking back when we started off, we all know about nutrient exhaustion that occurred, and scientists, together with farmers coming to scientists saying, we've got a problem, fix it. And so we learnt about nutrient requirements, we learnt about micronutrients, yield started to increase again, and superphosphate deficiencies became known about, and we started to plateau as a result of that. As we moved into mechanisation and we got into legume rotations that put in nitrogen, we see an increase again. And then what really started to take off then more recently is actually break crop, understanding of use of break crops in the system. And you can see there was an increase in yields as a result of the break crops too. Each of those major yield sort of jumps has been a result of scientific innovation with farmers and understanding what's actually going on in the system. I think it's true to say, as far as break crops go, we don't fully understand the science of why break crops actually work. If we could actually manipulate it without the break crop. Just do what a break crop does in the system at a reasonable cost, but we don't really understand it fully. There's a lot of ideas there about it, but it's an integrated package in the system. You can see the drought effect later on, but we won't worry about droughts. Just to point out that how we can push up to production limits. This is a well-known old graph actually, but actually it's John Angus of CSIRO gave a talk with this graph in it, and I nicked it, so it's not mine. But basically what it shows here is the yield on the left-hand side, and the bottom is the rainfall in millimetres during the growing season, so it's April to September rainfall. Many of you might know this graph. But you see a yield line there. The line there is actually the water-limited potential of the system. And if you look at all the open circles there across Southeast Australia, including WA, if you're up on the line, you're actually maxing your production system. So your management system is actually giving you maximum production of yield for that rainfall zone. And what you notice is a lot of it falls below that line. So if I took this area here, about 250 millimetres, for example, of growing season rainfall, I should be up over 4 tonnes a hectare. Possibly. That's maximum. We know we're nowhere near that for the state. So in effect, you can ask the question, why? And we should start to put together teams to look at why this is the case. Why is it we haven't got to this level? How do we break through? How do we really break through to push our yields up? Because if we did, the productivity in our farms is going to go through the roof, and basically the salinity problem becomes less of an issue, even for broadacre agriculture. That's our challenge. So I think a combination of improved on-farm productivity with targeted research, coupled with an understanding of how to integrate productive use of soil and land into our integrated operation will be the future of the wheat belt. If you achieve that, the future is very bright indeed. Okay, just to let me finish as well, I noticed from Glenn has actually made a very good case as well for the adaptability of the farming community generally, and pointed out living with it and working with it was the way they went about the business. And it also occurs to me that this idea of innovation is also captured really in the old woes of the ancient mariner, sitting on his little boat in the briny sea thinking, basically here I am and water all about me, but not know where to get a drink, or words to that effect. I've praised it somewhat. But basically, if you think about now, a millennium later, ocean-going yacht races don't care. Just turn on your little personal desalinator and you've got all the fresh water you want. So for them, it's no longer a barrier. And equally, innovation and progress overcomes barriers. It takes a while for adoption. This is the point also made in rebuttal over here, that in fact, adoption times actually have a long time sequence. We know this. It's not going to happen in a 20-year period usually. 10% of adopters in the first decade or so know this to be true. And we see now, if we look to the future, that we may see more adoption of these saltland techniques, but it's still early days. You can't expect the whole community to pick it up in the first decade. It doesn't happen. On that note, I will finish slightly early because I think our case is very strong. I think we've demonstrated quite clearly that there is a value in production on saline land. I think we've put forward to you the grand challenge to improve productivity generally, linking the two together, and the future of the wheat belt is secure. Thank you.